Friend's girlfriend discovered our inside joke nickname for her was Veronica Mcvampire. Now she's upset, and their relationship is at stake. My friend Nate and I met about a year and a half ago when I was finishing up my degree. He was an assistant lecturer and a PhD student in my department, and he taught a guest lecture that was incredibly close to the topic I was using for my dissertation. From the first moment, I thought he was gorgeous, but the university had a strict rule against staff dating students, thanks to some messy situation in the past and the inherent power dynamics. So, I kept it friendly. After that lecture, I stayed behind to chat with him about my paper, and he agreed to help. One meeting became a string of dissertation hangouts that gradually turned into us just hanging out, drifting far away from dissertation topics sometimes. Over those weeks, we became friends. I won't pretend that nothing ever happened. After he was no longer my lecturer and all potential rules were out of the way, we did drunkenly kiss once. It wasn't bad, but there just wasn't any spark. Whatever initial attraction existed fizzled away, and our friendship settled into a purely platonic place. We both agreed to forget about the kiss, and it never became an issue again, at least, until very recently. During the months he helped me, we built up a whole host of weird inside jokes. One of these started when Nate confessed his parents were manipulative and pushing him to get married, since his younger brother already had. He wasn't even dating anyone, nor was he about to submit to his mother's matchmaking. I joked that he should say he was in a serious relationship, with a vampire. This became our running joke: he was dating a vampire girlfriend. She had a ridiculous name, let's call her Veronica Mcvampire, and a whole elaborate personality. We even booked tickets to a gig together as Nate and Veronica Mcvampire. Nobody questioned it, since the payment matched his name. Whenever he went out with a girl, the joke was he was secretly cheating on Veronica. This weird, inside joke quickly became a firm fixture in our friendship. Then, Nate met someone, Kate. What made it even funnier was that, without meaning to, Kate actually matched a bunch of the personality traits we'd assigned Veronica. She worked night shifts, almost never left her place in the daylight, and generally just had this quirky nocturnal vibe. Before they even started officially dating, we decided, half joking, half serious, that in our little joke universe, Kate was Veronica. It was all a vampire loyalty test to make sure Nate would stay true. Dumb as it was, the joke just stuck. Instead of calling her by her real name in texts, Nate and I just called her Veronica, especially in any message where context made it obvious. For example, I'd text, "Hey, are we still on for dinner with V tonight?" Or, "V isn't feeling well, you'll have to go to the party without us." To be clear, I didn't have anything against Kate. Actually, I liked her. We got along, maybe not best friends, but definitely friendly. I could see how happy she made Nate, and we never said anything harsh or mocking about her or Veronica, just inside joke stuff. The name we used for Veronica wasn't even remotely common among women our age in the UK. It was all pure, quirky fun. Last night, things exploded. At 11 p.m., Nate texted me, "Can I come over? It's important." I figured he wanted to talk about something else entirely since I just finished work and was nearby. I offered to go to his, but he called, voice tense, "It's really not a good idea for you to come over. It's about Kate." I blurted out, "Oh shit, is everything okay with Veronica?" That's when I suddenly heard Kate shriek and start crying in the background, or maybe she was on speaker. "Why the fuck do you call me that? What's wrong with you?" Apparently, an earlier text I'd sent referring to Veronica had flashed on Nate's phone. She'd found it weird, since Nate and her had already cancelled their plans for the night. When she asked about it, Nate tried to brush it off as an inside joke with me, but that only made her more suspicious. Her mind jumped to me being Veronica and some kind of secret girlfriend. Nate had already told her about that one time we kissed, right up front, because we spent a lot of time together and she'd originally suspected something. I'd talked to her directly about it before, and I thought the whole thing was done, but now she wanted to see all of our old messages. Browsing through them, it became quickly obvious what the truth was. We'd been calling her Veronica for ages. When Nate explained why, she just couldn't accept it. Why were we calling her weird names? Why would we make stuff up about her, not realizing the entire joke had existed before we'd even met her? Why were we talking about her so much, period? She stormed out pretty quickly, leaving Nate struggling to comfort her. Afterward, he asked if I'd come over, but I told him that would be a terrible idea. I'd only make things worse right now. I suggested we grab a drink and talk somewhere neutral instead, so he wasn't alone. In the end, Nate crashed on my couch that night. Now, Kate won't return his calls or texts. She already had plans to be out of town with her dad until Sunday, but I don't think she plans to contact him at all. I honestly have no idea what to do. Nate wants me to speak to her, but jumping further into this mess seems like a recipe for disaster. The whole situation feels completely absurd, an argument you'd expect from middle schoolers, not grown adults nearing 30. Still, I know we were the ones who dragged things into immaturity in the first place. Update 1. My earlier post about calling my friend's girlfriend a jealous vampire stirred up a lot. I know most people probably hate me now, and I get it. I absolutely came off as nasty and petty, especially if the only thing you've heard about me is that single, ugly moment. Sure, I could write out some redemption tale about the time I saved a stray kitten, but really, none of that changes what happened between us, or what matters here. Still, Wild as it sounds, things got even weirder after that fight. A ridiculous argument just spiraled into mayhem. And just for your amusement, here's how the rest played out. I don't need any advice at this point, trust me, I know I've made mistakes. Nate is completely blocked now, and both Emily and I made it clear, if he tries to contact either of us, we're going straight to the university with a formal complaint. A lot of people ask me why Nate slept over in the first place, or why we went drinking it all that night. I get it, it was a bad idea given the circumstances, but that night, it was late, and really, the only places open were pubs. I felt like having a chat in public would look less suspicious than having him run straight to my place like he needed emotional backup. Then he missed the last bus and, honestly, taxis are expensive, so he ended up staying. I know my apology to Kate sucked. I was tired, I was upset, and I bungled it, the words fell flat. It wasn't a real apology, and I owned up to that. I've since spoken to her and actually apologized for real, said the words. And about that line where I said I'd win, I never meant I thought getting rid of Kate was some kind of victory. It was more complicated than that. When I met up with Nate, the first thing out of his mouth was how everything was Kate's fault. I shut that right down and told him otherwise. Then he started in with, I'll always take your side, and knowing what I do now, I hate how I didn't catch on to just how wrong everything was, much sooner. My friend Anna sent me updates about what Kate was saying, with her permission. I didn't get screenshots or anything, but Anna would tell me things like, she's been crying and she says there's a lot you don't know. That led to a phone call, with Anna acting as a mediator. Here's where things got wild. So, as Anna had said, Kate reached out to her, panicked and hurt, saying her relationship was falling apart and it was my fault. Anna got the full story from her and was shocked. There was so much more going on than any of us realized. Anna was almost certain I had no idea. She asked Kate if she really believed I'd stay friends with Nate if I knew everything. That got Kate to agree to talk to me. On the phone, I immediately apologized, genuinely apologized. She barely acknowledged it and went straight to the point. Did I know Nate was obsessed with me? I told her we're just friends, that the kiss meant nothing, all the usual denials. Turns out, that's not what Nate had told her. She asked me about our past, and we were open about it. Apparently, he admitted to her that the only reason we weren't together is because I told him I didn't feel anything, but he had wanted more. For as long as I'd known him, he hoped that something would happen, and when it didn't, he just bottled everything up and tried not to lose me. That's messy enough, but then he told her this wasn't the first time. In every relationship, he had a pattern. Most of the girls he's dated are about 5 years younger than he is. Apart from Kate and me, none of them were in his department or in danger of breaking any university rules, but all except one of them actually attend my university. He apparently loves role-playing, and he asks the girls he dates to pretend to be women he's really into, namely, me and his ex from a couple years back. Kate only realized what was happening when she met me. Before that, she'd played along a few times. The kicker is, he doesn't tell them they're pretending to be a real person in his life. He got a wig and an outfit, a dress like one I wear all the time, a cheer uniform like his ex had, for each role. He makes them say specific things. I mean, you can't control people's fantasies, but to go to these extremes and not tell your partner? That's a whole new level of creepy. And then there was the lying. He told me he just turned 26 when we met. Told Kate he'd turned 26 a week before meeting her. Pretty laughable, since he and I had just planned his 27th birthday. She'd caught a glimpse of his ID at some point and realized a few odd things. First, he goes by his middle name, which isn't that weird alone, but he never told her. Then, she saw his birth date. His real birthday is what he told me, but he's actually a year older, 28. The birthday he gave her was random and completely wrong. When she confronted him about it, he insisted he didn't want her feeling uncomfortable about the age gap. She flat out told him she was more uncomfortable now that she knew he'd lied. There was an address on his provisional too, different city from where he said he was from and the university is in. She asked about it, and he spun this confusing story about his parents living there, and then said he was from a different place because of a postcode. Eventually he just mumbled something about living in Leeds being the reason his ID had a York address, though it clearly made no sense. Kate already knew about the nickname. That wasn't really the issue. She'd seen it, asked about it, and he'd told her I'd given her the nickname. He just kept going along with it for fun, apparently. She asked him to drop it, told him she didn't like it, and he blew her off, insisting she was being dramatic. Now, even after hearing my version of events, she doesn't love that I kept the joke running after we became friends. She says she probably would have found it funny if I'd actually told her about it before all of this instead of her feeling like I was laughing at her behind her back. Instead, she got convinced that Nate and I were having some secret affair and shutting her out with dumb nicknames and lies. She doesn't want to see Nate again, and while she forgives me for the nickname, she doesn't want to drop everything and be best friends either. I get it. That's fair. She's asked me to collect her things from Nate's place and meet up for a chat. She clarified that she won't tell me what to do but hopes I'll reconsider my friendship with him after all this. Honestly, I'm not comfortable going over to his place alone after all I've learned, so Anna will come with me. I haven't said a thing to Nate about what I know, and I won't until Kate's things are safely out. I doubt he'll get violent, but I can absolutely imagine him being petty and maybe damaging her stuff, And since it's become painfully obvious I never really knew him at all, I can't guarantee he won't do something even worse. Once Anna and I have Kate's things, we'll contact Nate together and tell him in no uncertain terms, he needs to keep away from us, or we'll go to the university. I know Nate has always been meticulous about not crossing the line, he's never technically done anything against the rules. Still, there's something off about how he befriends students and almost immediately pursues romantic relationships the moment his restrictions end. It's not a one-off, it's a pattern. I'm convinced that if the uni caught even a whiff of this, they'd keep an eye on him. Even if he managed to escape on a technicality, it would look terrible for him professionally. Honestly, I don't have much more to add. I said it before, I don't see myself ever being close friends with Kate, but it's clear that if she wants to stay friends with anyone in our group, she can. As for the rest of us, there's no question, after all of this, we're all cutting ties with Nate. Update 2. We went to get Kate's things on Wednesday. He'd promised to leave the keys with his neighbor and be out, he wasn't. The door opened to that too bright politeness he puts on when he's holding something back. He'd stacked Kate's stuff in the hall like he'd staged a moving out montage, bags lined up, a neat little pile of folded jumpers, her favorite mug wrapped in a tea towel. Then he stepped aside like a hotel concierge and said, "We can be adults about this." Anna hovered behind me like a human camera tripod with her phone on, and I told him I wasn't here to talk. He tried anyway, a ramble about misunderstandings and loyalty and how he'd used the wrong words when he'd spoken to Kate. He needed me to know he wasn't obsessed with me, he was attached to a dynamic. I told him that sounded worse. He laughed at the wrong time. It filled the space and made my skin crawl. We didn't poke through anything, just picked up what was clearly hers, but he'd put one extra gift on top of her tote bag, a tacky black wig, still shedding, and a plastic set of fangs in a Halloween blister pack. He'd nestled them into one of her beanies like he thought he was being funny. I picked them up and handed them back. He shrugged and said it was just props. When I asked for Kate's spare key back, he did that thing where he pretended he'd already given it to me, then patted his pockets like it might magically appear. It was on his own keyring the entire time. I said his name like a warning and told him I'd start ringing 101 there and then. He pried it off and slid it across the table like we were trading contraband. We almost got out clean and then he tried to wedge the door with his foot. He hadn't raised his voice once, he didn't need to. He just lowered it and asked me if I'd really thought this through and whether I understood what it looks like when a former student files complaints about a staff member she used to kiss. For a full 2 seconds, I thought I might throw the fangs at his head. Anna said, very clearly, that if he moved his foot an inch she'd start screaming and we'd meet his neighbors properly. He moved. We left. At Kate's, she opened the bag sitting cross-legged on the floor. The wig was the first thing she clocked. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she pulled out a small canvas pouch she hadn't packed, a cheap, scratchy thing with a drawstring. Inside were Polaroids, not explicit, not even interesting, just small squares of her from the neck up, grinning in that same wig, a pair of novelty vampire teeth clacked between her lips. They were clearly taken in his living room. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for the entire relationship and put them back in the pouch. We went to the student union the next morning because she wanted something official, not just a text chain and threats. They were clinical about it in a way that felt reassuring. There's a procedure. They have words for this: boundary concerns, conduct, misrepresentation. I gave a statement and handed over what I had. Kate gave hers. The woman we spoke to didn't flinch when I said his full name. She'd heard it before. That silenced me more than anything he'd said at the door. By Friday, it wasn't quiet anymore. He broke the no contact we'd set immediately with a 3-paragraph email from his university address that managed to be both a non-apology and a legal threat. He CC'd his supervisor and the head of school like I'd copied him in on a timeline for an essay. The subject was clarification. He wrote, "I'm concerned you've misconstrued my attempts at humor, and I fear you're being coached, and I have contemporaneous notes." He attached a PDF he'd literally titled Context. It was 5 pages of him transcribing conversations we'd had, with little italicized comments about what I really meant. He'd labeled me V throughout, which made it accidentally hilarious and also so damning I had to sit down. I forwarded the whole thing to the complaints office and the SU contact with a single line: "He's contacting me, please note the attachment title." His supervisor rang me, no nonsense, clipped, careful, and asked if I'd be willing to meet on campus with someone from HR present. I said yes. In the meeting, they didn't ask me for gossip. They asked about dates, whether I'd ever been his student in any official capacity when anything happened, no, whether he'd used his position to get access to me, not then, not exactly, whether I felt pressured, whether he'd lied about his age. When I mentioned the wig and the role-playing and the way he carried the nickname on after being asked to stop, I watched the HR person's face set like cement. No one said suspended, but they did say relieved of teaching duties while we investigate. It was the first moment I believed this would reach outside our little circle. Kate, meanwhile, was a machine. She went through her messages and found an email address that wasn't his, an old Proton mail he'd used for parking permits and tickets. The recovery phone number attached was a spare she didn't recognize. She sent one polite line: "Please delete any photos of me, do not contact me," and blocked it. An hour later, that same address emailed me as Veronica. It was a single sentence: "I think you're overreacting." I didn't respond. I forwarded that, too. The complaints officer replied within the hour and said, "Thank you, we have what we need." Later that night, a girl messaged Anna asking for my number. She'd been in Nate's tutorial group last year. She'd worked with him on a project and started dating him after the term ended. It fizzled quickly. She didn't know about wigs, but she knew about the age lie and the fake birthday, and she knew about the character thing because he'd asked her to call him by his middle name in bed and to pretend we were meeting for the first time after class. She hadn't reported anything because it felt petty and embarrassing, and she blamed herself for being naive. She sent Kate a photo, him in that living room, hair messed, with the same stupid black wig pushed into the cushions in the background. Every story gained an extra inch of spine with that one picture. Saturday morning, I woke to a florist delivery, one single white rose with a note attached. On the card, "To V, no more jokes, promise."
N. I laughed because the alternative was screaming.
I didn't touch it. I photographed it on my doormat and emailed the picture to HR with a timestamp. Then I put the rose in the bin still wrapped in cellophane like it was a biohazard and took out the rubbish. By Sunday, the department had scrubbed his name off the teaching rota for the spring module. The email announcement didn't name him, but it said the sessions would be covered by another teaching fellow due to unforeseen staffing changes. In our group chat, Emily said her seminar had had a stand-in for his office hour. He hadn't turned up. He tried one more thing, that evening, a long message to my personal email that looked like it had been drafted and redrafted a dozen times. He finally said the words "I'm sorry," then immediately spoiled it with "but." He wanted me to understand that he fell in love with the idea of us, that he was writing a paper on parasocial dynamics and we'd been data. He implied I'd consented to that by sticking around. He wasn't doing research on me, he doesn't have ethics approval for that, he couldn't. I sent that one to the research integrity inbox with a line: "If he says he's been collecting data on students, please note he did not have my consent." Kate and I met for a coffee that afternoon like we'd planned. It wasn't some miraculous bonding session. We sat by the window in a cafe that smells like warm bread and talked about practical things, storage, phone numbers to block, where she'd sleep if he appeared at her building, and then she told me something that winded me. On their first date, he'd taken her to that gig where we'd booked tickets as Nate and Veronica Mcvampire. He'd thought it was hilarious. He'd set the Wi-Fi in his flat to V and N the week after she met me. She hadn't noticed at the time, she wasn't looking. She noticed now. She'd changed her locks and set her Ring camera to notify on any motion. She showed me a boxy little pewter necklace she'd got from her dad when she was 16, the one she thought he'd misplaced, tucked in the bottom of one of the bags. That, more than the wigs or the silly emails, made me feel sick. I expected the adrenaline to wear off and for everything to feel ordinary again. It hasn't yet. The last thing that happened, because apparently there's always a last thing and then another, was an email from the university secretary's office asking if I'd be willing to provide copies of my messages with him spanning the period when he was teaching assistant and immediately after. They said there's a wider review. Nothing dramatic in their language, just efficient and heavy. I said yes. I pulled the threads and watched the entire history print into a PDF that took forever to load. His context file didn't look so clever alongside it. I'm not writing this because I've had some grand epiphany or because any of it is cleanly done. I'm writing it because on Wednesday, I stood in that hallway holding a wig by its fringe, and by Sunday a man who used to grade first-year essays had lost his teaching, sent me a flower like we were in a Victorian novel, and outed himself as a would-be social scientist of his own girlfriend's. There isn't a tidy end to that, but there is a door locked behind us and a promise that if he tries to knock, it won't just be me opening it. Update 3. The secretary's office meeting was in a windowless room that pretended to be humane with a bowl of mints. They opened a laptop and spoke in those clipped, practical sentences that make you feel like a form with legs. There's a no contact direction now, formal, capital letters, his name next to mine, then Kate's, then Anna's. Campus services disabled his card. If he needs the building, he emails a generic inbox with 2 business days notice and a chaperone meets him. He keeps his stipend while they investigate. He loses teaching, office hours, any reason to be near first years. They didn't call it a suspension. They said precautionary measures, which is suspension with extra syllables. That night, something slid through my letterbox hard enough to knock into my shoes. Brown envelope, no stamp, my name written with a pen that blotched on the vowels. Inside, his context printed on cheap paper, corners stapled at a slant, plus a train ticket from the night of my dissertation drinks and a post-it stuck to the plastic sleeve. He'd written for the archive like he was curating us. I didn't touch the ticket. I took photos and emailed HR and the complaints officer. Then I rang 101, did my best impression of a calm person, and logged it. 2 officers came by in fluorescent jackets that made my living room look like a rave. They were polite in that late-hour way and used phrases like harassment threshold and course of conduct. They said they'd speak to him. I slept with the kettle in the bedroom because I couldn't face crossing the dark flat in the morning. By noon the next day, he'd replied to the university's instruction not to contact me by contacting me again. A new email, subject line V. Just the letter. The body was blank except for a YouTube link to a song we'd once put on in his kitchen while we were friends did the washing up. The link preview loaded slow, that little spinning circle like a finger tapping your forehead. I didn't click. Forward, forward, forward. The IT person wrote back to say the email originated from a university IP at 117. Thank you, Ems, my surname, this is helpful, which read like a sigh. He tried a solicitor next. A letter with an embossed crest from a firm in a business park off the Ring Road. Our client instructs us that your allegations are defamatory and settlement opportunity. He'd CC'd HR again like he wanted marks on a rubric. The secretary's office replied to me before I'd finished reading, told me not to engage, and attached a PDF of their external correspondence protocol. The crest on the letter had a typo in the firm's address. When I checked company's house, they'd incorporated 4 months ago. It was less a law firm and more a printer and a friend. In the gaps, other women turned up like lights going on in flats across a street. Anna set up a group chat and we stared at one another's names without knowing what to say. The cheer uniform ex sent a photo of a folder she'd seen on his desktop once when she was looking for a film. Veronica, spelled correctly, sitting next to teaching and expenses. She said she'd thought it was a band. A girl 2 years below me forwarded a Qualtrics survey link he'd texted her last spring titled Intimacy Scripts and Attachment Styles. No ethics statement, just a consent box you had to tick to proceed.
One of the questions asked, how often do you adopt a role at your partner's request, e.g., wearing a wig, performing a character?
With example, Veronica. Example. The word made me dizzy. The Research Integrity Office wrote to me separately to ask if I'd ever been sent that link. I hadn't. Kate had. It had ended up buried between memes and shift swaps. She hadn't clicked. We sent them screenshots. They sent back a brisk, grateful paragraph and a sentence about unauthorized human subjects research that made me want to sit down again. He broke the no contact direction in person next. Not dramatic, not a scene, just there. Outside the library, where the path pinches into a bottleneck, he waited on the low wall like a student without a lecture. I saw him too late to peel off. He stood, hands empty to show he meant nothing, and said, I'm not here to talk to you. I said, you just did. Security materialized the way they do when you drop something glass in the cafe. They flanked him and asked him to leave. He walked with them, turned his head once like he was trying to hear someone else's conversation. The police rang the next morning and said they'd issued him with a harassment warning. They explained it 3 times in 3 different ways so I wouldn't mistake it for a restraining order. It isn't. It's a line in a log with his name on it and what they call words to the wise. It means if he crosses it again, they don't have to start at the beginning. Later that day, Kate's Ring camera pinged. Middle of the afternoon, perfect daylight. A man in a beanie set a small jiffy bag on her mat, pressed the bell, and walked away without waiting. Not him. A courier. The return address on the label was blank. Inside, a USB stick and a handwritten note on a torn sheet of lined paper. Proof, it said. Please read with an open mind. She didn't plug it into anything. She texted me a picture of the stick sitting on a saucer like a sugar cube and said, do I burn it? We took it to the station instead. A detective in a gray cardigan and a tired bun booked it into evidence like we'd handed her a pet rock. She said if it was normal, they'd post it back. If it wasn't, we'd hear. Some of this sounds like we're dragging him into the sun. It didn't feel like that. It felt like paperwork and errands. It felt like wiping down a countertop over and over because something sticky won't lift. On Thursday, his staff profile vanished. Not just his face, the whole page 400 forward. The teaching rota updated again with an email from the head of school that used more syllables to say the same nothing. In the stairwell by the seminar rooms, they'd peeled his name off a plastic strip. You could see the cleaner rectangle where the adhesive had been. I ran my thumb over it like it might tell me a story. That afternoon, someone from IT asked me if I recognized an email address, Veronica M. at Outlook. The dots were his pattern. The address had been used to try to access my old Flickr, my long-dead Tumblr, Kate's Depop. They gave me the times, I gave them the feeling of my ribs climbing into my throat. He wasn't a mastermind, he was thorough. That's worse. Friday, the USB wasn't a virus. It was text files and PDFs, a little museum of his head, scripts. I read them on police stationery in a cooled room with a window that didn't open. Dialogue like stage directions, V enters, says, followed by lines that were almost things I had said and then swerved into the uncanny valley. He'd written 3 endings, one where I forgive him and we laugh about our silly games, one where I scream at him for 3 pages, and one where I die. Not a murder fantasy. A noble fade to black where I go away and he writes about me forever. He'd titled the file Closure. He wrote to his cohort to say he was taking an interruption of studies for personal reasons. The message got forwarded to me, because that is how universities work. He signed it with his first name and his middle name and in brackets, Nate. I didn't know what to do with that bracket. I still don't. The last thing, because there is always a last thing until there isn't, was a voicemail on Anna's phone from a number that showed as private, a man who wasn't him. Quiet, professional, with a patience that made me think of chess. He said he was representing Nate informally and wanted to explore a mediated conversation. He used a phrase I recognized from a restorative justice poster outside the SU bar. Anna said no and hung up and then we all sat on the floor of my flat and watched the light crawl over the rug and didn't speak for 10 minutes. Sometimes the adult thing to do is to refuse to be in the room. I keep thinking about the first stupid joke in a cafe about a vampire girlfriend, the teeth and the wig and the fake blood we never bought. I keep thinking how long he would have kept pretending this was an essay if we'd let him. This week, he ran out of rooms to pretend in. He's not emailing me. He might be emailing someone else. I am not the archive. The rosebush outside my building threw new thorns overnight. The square of clean plastic on the stairwell sign will get dusty and match the rest, and I will stop noticing. I am not there yet. Update 4. The email about court came at 8:12 on a Tuesday morning. Subject line, application for stalking protection order. Plain as bread. They said I didn't have to attend, but that my presence may assist the bench. I ironed a shirt I haven't ironed since my viva and sat in a magistrate's court that smells like hot dust and carpet cleaner. The clerk said my name in the sing-song that makes it not a name anymore. He came in last, not handcuffed, in a suit that didn't know his shoulders. He looked at the clock, not at me. The officer read from a statement that had turned my week into bullet points without bullets. The emails. The rose. The envelope. The library wall. The USB on the saucer. When they said the word scripts, he lifted his chin like he was proud of a paper acceptance. The bench asked if he opposed the order. His solicitor, older, tired, real this time, stood and said they didn't accept the characterization but wouldn't contest today. The order went on for 2 years. No contact directly or indirectly with me, with Kate, with Anna. No approach within 200 meters of our homes or regular workplaces. No creating accounts that reference my name or the nickname. No commentary on social media reasonably capable of identifying us. Requirement to surrender any devices if asked to check for breaches. Served in court, the clerk said, and stamped a paper that shook when she hit it. He looked at the stamp like it was a complicated graph. After, outside, a man with a press badge I didn't recognize asked me for a general comment about safety on campus. I stared at his pen until he put it back in his pocket and apologized. Research Integrity wrote the next day. Preliminary finding, case to answer, breach of the code, unauthorized collection of data, use of a survey instrument without ethics approval, participants drawn from a vulnerable group by reason of their student status. They'd referred it to student discipline. His network access would be limited to a whitelisted list of sites required for progression, which read funnier than they meant. They copied his funder. The funder replied in the same thread like a family member replying all to wedding travel plans. Stipend paused, pending outcome. He sent a message to his cohort that evening, forwarded to me by the girl who'd sent the cheer uniform picture, saying he was taking time to reflect on his practice. He signed it with both names and no brackets this time. The student paper ran a piece on Thursday. PGR removed from teaching amid misconduct probe. No names, a stock photo of the building with the ugly Balfour brick and a quote from the university that said nothing at length. I read it on my phone sitting on the bus and watch the comments try to build a person out of 3 vague sentences. Kate texted me a screenshot of her dad saying he was proud of her for reporting. I sent back a picture of my tea because I couldn't think what to say that didn't sound like a certificate. We thought the order would stretch everything out and quiet it. It did, mostly. Then a letter turned up addressed to my flatmate from 3 years ago, same address, different name, same slanted hand. The return to sender on the envelope was a P.O. box in a town we'd never been to. Inside was nothing. Just the envelope, turned into a boomerang. I took a photo, put the empty paper back in the empty paper, and walked it to the police station like a bad magic trick. The desk sergeant said, he tests lines, and wrote the incident number on a post-it that stuck to my finger. Another woman messaged Anna. Not a student, a pupil he'd had through one of those tutoring apps in his first year of the PhD, A-level sociology, 2 summers ago. She said he'd added her on Instagram after her results and slid into her DMs with a suggestion for a photo project about identity. She blocked him and told her mom, who didn't want to fight over it. She found the article, put his face to the name in her head, and sent us a screenshot of his first message. The timestamp, the wording, the way he wrote "You're very articulate for your age." We sent it to the complaints email and the officer wrote back, "Thank you, this extends our safeguarding frame." Frame. Like you can put glass over a thing and call it contained. His mother found my Facebook through a tagged picture from a birthday 6 years ago and sent a message that began, as a mother, and ended, he's ill. There was a cross emoji and a line about prayer. I didn't reply. I sent a screenshot to HR because at this point I forward things like breathing and then I blocked a woman I've never met who bakes in a kitchen that looks exactly like you think it does. For a week, the most dramatic thing that happened was me moving the kettle back to the kitchen and sleeping through the night without imagining feet on my stairs. Then IT rang, an actual phone call, not an email, to ask permission to put a flag on my name in the university monitoring software. Keywords, the man said, and read out a list that included my surname, the nickname, his first name, his middle name, the email handles we already knew, and 2 we didn't. It felt like asking the fire alarm to taste smoke. I said yes. He said, "We'll come back to you if anything pings," and sounded both apologetic and faintly excited by a problem he could actually fix. The ping came on a Sunday. He had posted a long, windy piece on a Medium account called Reflexive Ethnographer about romance as fieldwork. No names, just enough itched edges to know it was us. He quoted me from a text where I'd said, "This is messy," and footnoted it as field note. IT took it down within an hour after someone at legal used a phrase I've only seen on TV, injunctive relief, and the page turned into a 404. The cached version stayed in my head. Police rang to say it wasn't a breach of the order by itself, but to screenshot everything, always, anyway. The student discipline letter arrived with 3 attachments and a tone like a smoke detector: notice of allegation, evidence bundle, hearing date. 2 weeks' time, a panel with an external member, right to be accompanied, right to ask questions through the chair. I won't be in the room, it's his hearing. I will sit in a witness room with blue chairs and wait for my slot, then talk to a camera that will preserve the dignity of all present. I asked the clerk if I had to look at him. She said no, unless I wanted to. I said I didn't. A woman from Research Ethics sent another email that was short and surgical. The Qualtrics account he'd used had been shut down. The survey had captured IPs. She used the phrase data subject rights and erasure. It made me think of rubbing out a pencil drawing and how the ghost of the line is always there if you tilt the paper. On Wednesday, Kate's lock clicked twice at 11:30 and I woke up on her sofa before I remembered I was there on purpose because she'd had a nightmare and didn't want the flat to be a stage. Her Ring camera had caught nothing. We drank hot chocolate with a dust of cinnamon and watched a cooking show in silence until the studio clapped someone who'd made a pie cry. She showed me a plain silver ring she'd bought online for £12 and put on her right hand because she wanted a new mark, not an old scar. It glowed under the TV light when she turned it and said, "I'm not giving him a chapter title." The hearing happened in a room with blinds that never quite meet in the middle. I wore the iron shirt again and sat in the waiting space with a potted plant that wasn't real. When they called me, I spoke into a little black eye on top of the monitor and tried to keep my hand still. His voice came through thin, as if it was traveling a long way, and when the chair asked him if he had any questions for me, he said, "I don't wish to cause distress," like a man reading an apology his lawyer wrote. He wanted to ask if I remembered consenting to be fictionalized. The chair said, evenly, "That is not a thing. They'll send their decision in writing within 5 working days." The phrase is so civilized it makes me tired. In the corridor, his supervisor, who has never looked scruffy in his life, had his shirt half untucked and a crease between his eyebrows like he'd tried to iron his forehead. He nodded at me, not a greeting, not a greeting, just a tiny stamp of reality. Later, he sent an email to his group with a reading list on ethics and a seminar titled Boundaries and Consent in Qualitative Research. It felt like dragging furniture after a flood. At 5 on Friday, the police called with a voice I recognized now. "He's been arrested," the officer said, and then left a careful beat so I wouldn't fill it with anything. Breach of order, contact through a third party. He'd sent a message through a classmate to the group chat he knew Anna had set up. "Tell her I'm not the villain," he wrote. The classmate took a screenshot and sent it to us like something hot you can't hold. They picked him up at his flat, processed him, and released him on bail with conditions that are the order plus more words. He has to attend a station twice a week to sign something that says he turned up. The officer said, "This is how it gets boring," and meant it as comfort. Boring is a luxury. I thought the last thing this time was going to be a letter with a university crest. It wasn't. The last thing was a photo Kate sent me of a shadow on her wall that looked like a person until she moved the lampshade and it didn't. We laughed at it for longer than it deserved and then both slept, properly, for the first time in what felt like a long essay. The decision letter will come when it comes. The adhesive shadow on the stairwell sign has picked up dust and looks like it was always there. The rosebush outside throws one small, vicious bud at the exact height of my thigh. I step around it without thinking now. I am learning that most of the aftermath is admin and small, stupid chores. It isn't a story you finish, it's a room you keep clean. For the first time, it feels like a room we get to lock from the inside.